69, the final score today. Pitt gets the win over Syracuse. So let's take a listen to how it all went down. In Syracuse's last contest against North Carolina, the Orange never found a lead. Top scorer J.J. Starling immediately made sure tonight's matchup didn't follow the same script. All right, well, I'll have your post-game highlights for you in just a moment. We do have to step aside for a quick break. All that and more coming up on Orange Overtime.
What if you remember something happening, something strange, something amazing, but there's no possible way that something you very distinctly remember happened? On the next Snap Judgment, we proudly present the Medicine Man. Snap Judgment. Do not miss it.
Sunday morning at 10 on 88.3 FM WAER.
Delve into the rich tapestry of acoustic-led folk, roots, and Americana music here on 88.3 FM WAER. Enjoy national and international acts, as well as local artists every Sunday with host Pete Thomas. Whether you're seeking the comfort of timeless classics or contemporary gems and music discovery, don't miss Common Threads, Sundays from 2 to 5, exclusively on 88.3 WAER, your local NPR station.
The game has gone final. It's time to listen how it all went down. Radio replay is up next on WAER.
Syracuse fell to Pittsburgh 80-69 tonight. Now it's time to listen to how it all went down. Thanks for sticking with us through some technical difficulties. Tyler Aiken here, your host of Orange Overtime. So, in Syracuse's last contest against North Carolina, the Orange never found a lead. Top scorer J.J. Starling immediately made sure that tonight's matchup did not follow the same script.
Lampkin handles straight away for the Cuse. Handoff to Jaquan Carlos. Now a cross-court pass to Starling, who triggers a three and nails it for the first points of the game. 3-0 Syracuse, 18:32 left in the opening half.
SU then developed a nice cushion early, but Pitt eventually started to find the cup. Panthers forward Zach Austin started the scoring for his squad.
Here's Austin on the handoff. Another handoff for Pitt. Now return to Austin, who triggers a deep three. Finally, something goes for Pittsburgh. The confetti sprays across the Peterson Event Center. Still a 9-3 advantage for the Cuse over Pitt. 14:51 left in the first half.
Austin fires the tray this season at just around 40%. The Orange, however, brought their own sharpshooter to the party, and his name is Chris Bell.
Bell dumps down low to Majstorovic. Pass out to the corner. Pass over to Carlos. Now Bell for another three. Nails it. Another quick shot by Chris Bell. A 22-6 advantage for the Orange over the Panthers. 10:51 left in the first half. And a timeout called by Jeff Capel. It's not hard to imagine why.
Bell got red hot from downtown, and Syracuse started to separate itself. Pitt, however, didn't give in. Panthers forward Guillermo Diaz-Graham connected from distance to bring his team within 2 possessions.
Pitt taking it up. A deep three from Diaz-Graham right off a handoff. Hits every part of the rim and goes in. Returns fire, 30-24. SU leads Pitt. 4 minutes left in the first half.
That was one of Pitt's 4 3-point makes in the game's opening frame. Syracuse, on the other hand, buried 9 long balls before the break, and forward Chris Bell was the biggest contributor.
And off to Davis. On the far side. Backs down on the baseline. Little time left on the shot clock. Chris Bell heaves one, and it goes from deep. Just barely snuck it in as it's 38-28. Syracuse over Pitt with 2:50 left in the first half.
Bell hit from deep 4 times in the first half, and Syracuse entered the locker room with a 41-34 advantage. But Pitt dug its heels in and came out firing after the midway point.
Jalen Lowe pushing in transition. Diaz-Graham straight away. Handoff to Lowe. Met by a double-team hedge. Swing back over to Diaz-Graham. One more to the corner for Leggett. The tray ball. You bet. Ish Leggett with an early 6 points here in the second half, and it's a 5-point game. 45-40. Cuse on top. 18:30 to go.
Back in late January, Panthers guard Ishmael Leggett dropped 16 points against the Orange, and he would top that mark this time around. Soon after that three-ball, Leggett's fellow guard tied the game up for the first time.
Resets with 7 on the ticker. Had his pocket picked. Jalen Lowe soaring down the court. Reverse lay is good. And we're tied up at 51 apiece here in the Pete. Jalen Lowe evens things up with 13 minutes to go, and Syracuse needs a timeout.
Jalen Lowe is Pitt's leading scorer and proved exactly why on that play. When the Panthers took their first lead, however, Lowe returned the reins to his backcourt mate.
Leggett, right corner, steps into a triple. Pure! And that is the first lead of the game for the Panthers. Ish Leggett makes it a 58-56 ball game with 9 minutes and 15 seconds to go.
Leggett piled up 19 points for Pitt, but SU's Chris Bell said, "Whatever you can do, I can do better."
Starling, does he have a counter? Driving down the right side, kick out for Bell, a triple. It's good. Chris Bell, 6 triples on the evening, and he pulls Syracuse back within 6, a much-needed tray ball with under 5 minutes to go. 20 points for Bell off the bench.
Bell led all scorers with 23 points by the end of the night, but the Panthers kept attacking from all angles. Jalen Lowe found forward Cameron Corrin for a bucket that got the crowd on its feet.
Lowe slices through the defense, behind the back pass. Corrin sticks it up and in. A little razzle-dazzle from Jalen Lowe to Cam Corrin, and that one may be the dagger. 72-62 with less than 2 minutes to go.
Jonah, you were right. That was indeed the dagger.
Well, that is how this one will come to a close. Pitt takes down Syracuse 80-69 here at Peterson Event Center. And with that, the Orange are guaranteed to finish the regular season sub 500 for just the second time in the past 55 years. A startling stat for a team that has struggled here in conference play.
All right, and that does it. So it's time to hand out our Pepsi Player of the Game. And I know you're probably thinking Ishmael Leggett, 19 points, tied for the team high on Pitt. You might also be thinking, how about Zach Austin? He also had 19 points for the Panthers. But at the end of the day, this game was won by coaching. Pitt outscored Syracuse 46-28 in the second half, and that was because of head coach Jeff Capel. He outcoached Adrian Autry down the stretch in the second half. And so the Pepsi Player of the Game is Pittsburgh head coach Jeff Capel. Tip the cap to a guy that beat Syracuse twice this year. His team's been on a downslide through the ACC over the last few weeks, but he got a much-needed win tonight over Syracuse. Now, speaking of Syracuse, got some upcoming broadcasts to preview. Syracuse men's lacrosse is at it this Saturday, February 2nd, taking on Harvard. Both teams coming off of losses. Syracuse on the road to Maryland this weekend, and Harvard lost to Colgate today, 19-15. So a rebounding opportunity for both of those squads. 1 o'clock face-off this Saturday. Countdown to face-off starts at 12:30 here on WAR. The basketball team has over a week off, but it is back in action at home next Wednesday, February 26th. Syracuse hosts NC State. Tip-off at 7. WAER's McClure Modeling countdown to tip-off is at 6:30 for that one. Some thank yous to hand out. Griffin Marcy, our engineer. He was helped by Jish Sokolsky, who handled pregame engineering. Gino Antamarino, our producer. Alex Burstein on radio replay, and the entire WAER sports desk. Thanks so much for everything you do for us. And, of course, don't go anywhere because the double overtime is coming up. That's until 11 o'clock. And Jish Sokolsky and Nico Horning will be breaking everything down. They'll be fielding your calls and texts, trying to break down why Syracuse collapsed and gave up the win today. If you want to call in, you can go to 315-443-2011. You can also text 315-556-3929. If you just want to watch, just want to listen, that's fine. You can stay tuned right here to 88.3 FM. You can also go to WAER.org or go to our Twitter page at WAER Sports, or look up WAER Sports Talk on Twitter to watch the show as well. So many different ways to enjoy this double overtime or not enjoy it. Listen, I know Syracuse fans, you might not be happy right now. You might disagree with our hosts, Nico and Jesh. We want to hear your voice, so make sure you call us, you text us, whatever you do, just enjoy the show. That does it for me. Now it's time to toss it over to Nico and Jesh so they can try to explain Syracuse's collapse today.
Tyler, I am numb. I'm numb. I'm not looking forward to that NC State game next Wednesday. I am looking forward to this break that the Syracuse basketball team has. I am excited to not have to watch this team for over a week because the performance they gave us tonight in the second half is blasphemous. Something that cannot be explained, that cannot be replicated, and frankly, I don't want to think about, but hey, we got you for the next hour and a half, so we're going to have to think about it. We're going to have to talk about it, Nico.
Right on, with the ACC tournament still in play for this team. That's the ridiculous part.
Oh, my goodness.
The Orange continue to find ways to lose. They did it tonight. A beautiful first half, a terrible second half, and the Stars completely fell out of the game for Syracuse. We'll break that down, and, this team takes 2 games, 1 loss against Miami, a win over Boston College. You have some chances at the ACC tournament, and then you come out and do this, and we'll see what happens going forward. But overall, a very, very disappointing night and ending to that game.
A chance at the ACC tournament, but the second losing season in the last 55 years was just secured tonight. We've got a long show ahead of us. Don't go anywhere. The double overtime starts right now.
The game may be over, but our coverage on WAER is not. Here on the double overtime, we'll be breaking down all the highs.
Copeland, left wing 3! It's good! Quadir Copeland wins the game for Syracuse!
For the first time in 1,856 days, Syracuse beats an AP Top 10 team.
Darling drives to his right, puts up a layup. No, but Copeland with the putback slam! Oh my goodness, Quadir Copeland makes a statement!
And the lows.
Syracuse walked into John Paul Jones Arena looking to make a statement, and Virginia said, oh no you don't. Cavaliers 84, Orange 62, your final.
Well, Syracuse heads into North Carolina and faces its worst loss in its history in the Atlantic Coast Conference.
Heartbreaking. The Orange bow out in the second round of the ACC tournament for the second year in a row.
Delivering our hottest takes along the way.
The expectations should be higher after a few years when Adrian Autry sets that bar, but the bar is still low.
5-star, Donnie Freeman.
Yep.
I mean, this guy has the tools. I think he could be the truth.
I think Lampkin and the combination of him and Carlos will rejuvenize this team and make them an actual complete basketball team.
Get your voice heard by calling in at 315-443-2011 or check out our YouTube at WAER Sports Talk. It's the double overtime, and it starts right now.
Josh Sokolsky joined by Nico Horning after an 80. Welcome into the double overtime. Joined by Nico Horning, I'm Josh Sokolsky, and an embarrassing, deflating, any adjective you want to use. It was that kind of loss. We have a ton of people who want to get their voice heard. Before me and Nico even begin to dig into this team, we have someone on the line, Keith from Cazenovia. After this disappointing loss, Keith, set the tone. What do you got for us?
Guys, never underestimate Syracuse's ability to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. And I gotta say, I think it's a very real possibility we lose the rest of the way out against the teams that we have coming up to play the last 4 games. And the fact that we seem to be, we were never going to sustain that shooting torrent that we had going in the first half. And when halftime came, I knew that we were going to blow this because there was no way we were going to sustain that. And at the end of the day, we got our coach. We got our coach in the second half. Pitt came out, hair on fire, and they did all the little things. They did all the big things. they just ran us off the court. And for us to give up 80 points in the last, 4 or 5 games, that's inexcusable. I mean, at some point, you got to play defense if you want to try to win a game. I think at some point, we got to acknowledge that we're going to lose the rest of the way out. It's over.
It's been 5 games in a row with 80 points dropped on the Orange, Keith. I agree with you. You do not keep 56% shooting from 3 the entire game. What did you see? Like, were the looks just worse? Were they just missing the open? I mean, I saw them missing open threes, but what about the coaching in your eyes really stuck out in that second half?
It was interesting because in the first half, there was some pretty good ball movement on defense. I was actually pleasantly surprised, and they were kind of cutting to the basket and shooting it back outside to give Bell some wide looks. Bell, for his part, did have some three-pointers in the second half, but one man does not a team make. And once you take away J.J. Starling, you got to hope that somebody just continues that hot shooting. And I think J.J., he had some drives to the basket, that terrible look to try to pass under the basket that went in and out of somebody's hands there, Davis's hands. And I think the coaching thing, we don't seem to be able to put our foot on the necks of opponents when we've got them down. I don't know whether we let it up or whether our philosophy changes on the offensive side, but in the first half, we were kind of driving to the hoop, kicking it out, taking some good looks, taking some solid shots. In the second half, we can't turn the ball over 13 times either. That's another thing. If we're not looking after the ball, how are you going to win,
Keith, I 100% agree with everything that you're saying. And, you talk about the coaching changes and the adjustments in the second half that Pitt made and maybe Syracuse didn't. One category that I'm looking at is the points in the paint. You talked about J.J. Starling not being involved in that second half with just 3 points compared to his 11 points in the first half, and that a lot of that has to be credited, in my opinion, for him not driving to the hole, not going to the basket. Why is Syracuse gearing away from going towards the rim, trying to get shots inside, and then instead missing 5 threes if you're J.J. Starling in that second half? It doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, we owned the paint in the first half. In the first half, Syracuse owned the paint. We seemed to be pretty strong in there. And the second half, we kind of stood around a little bit. And then, some of our big guys, I don't know about you guys, but sometimes I cringe when I see McLeod or even Lampkin trying to put the ball
we were talking about it all game. We mentioned...
put it up.
Yeah, we mentioned Majstorovic looks out of place. I think Lampkin's played very well the last couple of weeks.
Sure.
Tonight, the numbers would say differently, and I think a lot of people would agree. But you look at Majstorovic, you look at Naheem McLeod. Both of them come out of here with 0 points, 0 rebounds in the second half. And Syracuse got completely dominated in the paint tonight. So, Keith, you're spot on. You're spot on with everything.
I cringe.
I cringe. Don't you guys kind of feel for a Power 5 conference? You can't have subs that come in and don't contribute, right? I mean, that's a huge problem right off the bat. You got to give your guys a rest every once in a while. But to have guys come off the bench and basically do nothing, to me, is just inexcusable for a major Division I Power 5 program.
Keith, you're bringing the sauce. You're bringing up great points. Thank you so much for calling into the show. And I agree. I cringe every time I see Naheem McLeod on the floor, Nico. Him and Peter Majstorovic. Keith brings up a great point. What does this bench do?
Nothing.
What does it do?
Nothing.
When Naheem McLeod was subbed out with about 5-10 minutes left in the second half, Coach Autry is yelling at a 7'4" individual to put his hands up. To put his hands up. What are you doing on the floor at 7 feet and 4 inches? One of the tallest players to ever play the game of basketball if you're not putting your hands up. There's something fundamentally wrong with this team. You can point to coaching, and yes, Syracuse absolutely got outcoached in the second half after such a promising first half. If you are a 7'4" individual and you're not putting your hands up, what are you doing on the basketball?
What are we doing on the basketball
What are you doing on the basketball
100%
floor?
agree. And a lot of this could be credited to some roster construction before the season, of course. But we're this far in, and we're having the same dang conversations that we did to start the year. It makes absolutely zero sense. Now, if you're looking at this game and you did not watch or you did not listen to this game, Syracuse had 28 bench points, all right? Pitt had 13 bench points. You'd think, all right, the bench did pretty well tonight. Well, you know what? The bench was one guy, and that was Chris Bell, scoring 23 of the 28 bench points tonight. That exactly goes along with your point and my point that this team has zero bench, except for Chris Bell, who you obviously rely on game in and game out.
And imagine saying that a month ago, Nico, right? Chris Bell was dead in the water, right? Hyperbolically speaking, of course, he was not hitting his shots. He was visibly frustrated on the floor. He was kind of dead weight when he was in the starting lineup. Today, he was the only one who showed any fight, and I'm not afraid to say that. Where's this Kyle Cuff who always comes out and gives energy? I didn't see that tonight. Where's Naheem McLeod coming out and, as Autry has said in games past, being the lifeblood of the team? Where is that? These are bench guys that have been lauded all year for coming in and making a difference, yet when it matters most, when, okay, we kind of have to win out if you're Syracuse, they have to win out to really secure that winning record, to make the ACC tournament. These bench guys come in with absolutely nothing to lose and everything to play for, and they still can't give any energy in the second half. They still can't do anything. It's flabbergasting. I don't know if that's a word, but it's flabbergasting.
I hate to say it, this team is soft. Woo! This team is soft. I think there's a couple guys on this team that aren't soft. Exactly.
Go ahead.
I think Eddie Lampkin's a dog.
Yes.
He shows the fight game in and game out. Maybe he didn't have his best game tonight, but he has been fighting for this team. Chris Bell, as maybe a poor of a stretch he's had this season, he can still fight. He showed that tonight. He showed that competitiveness. J.J. Starling is competitive, but it only seems like he picks a half and plays well, and then the other half he doesn't show up at all. Outside of that, I don't see much fight from this team. And that has really bothered me coming into this game, is the lack of urgency on both sides of the ball. I look at a guy like Peter Majstorovic, and I don't know where the energy's coming from. And I know Coach Autry gets on him time and time again, including in the last couple of minutes of that North Carolina game last Saturday when Majstorovic made a couple of brutal fouls there at the end when Syracuse didn't have to foul towards the end of the game. There's certain instances of a lack of toughness and maybe even a mental space where this team is at right now that it is not good. And I'm not again, that does not go towards every player on this team. There are a couple that stand out to me more than others, but this team is overall pretty soft.
If you heard the little dial tone, that's a reminder that it's not just us two talking about this Syracuse basketball team. We want you to call in and sound off on this team. This is a safe space for any opinion you might have on Syracuse basketball. We've got you until 11 o'clock, so please let us know what you think. You can call in at 315-443-2011. You can text us 315-556-3929. Interact with us on socials at W8ER Sports Talk on your favorite social media platforms. I want to talk a little bit more. You mentioned fight. Or maybe the intangible stuff that Syracuse just doesn't have. I want to know exactly from you, Nico, from anybody, what is Peter Majstorovic doing on this basketball team? The Peter Majstorovic experiment has failed, and it failed right from the jump. His season high in points is 10, which he had last time against Pittsburgh. But other than that, where has he been? What does he do well? I ask anybody. What does he do well? He has the rawness and mental mistakes of a project, but does not have the athleticism to justify getting the minutes. He is a liability on offense. All he really does is set screens, I think, to a pick and roll, and midway through the second half, where he was setting a screen up top for Jaquan Carlos, and you're supposed to roll to the basket or pop out to the three-point line, which, again, I don't trust Peter Majstorovic as a shooter. He bricked a wide-open shot earlier. So he does a half roll. He stops at the elbow, stops his feet, catches the ball, loses it. That's just the epitome of the Peter Majstorovic experiment. He continues to get minutes, and it baffles me. It shows how thin this Syracuse bench is now that Donnie Freeman is out for the season. It shows how thin it's always been that he's still got minutes even when Donnie Freeman played. He doesn't shoot well. He fouls on defense instead of playing aggressive. He doesn't crash the glass, and when he does, he doesn't get the rebound unless it ping-pongs around. He's not that big. He's not that strong. He can't shoot. What does Peter Majstorovic do? I don't know, and I implore anyone to tell me.
You're spot on. You're spot on. I don't have anything to add. I don't see much flavor that he adds to this team. And, you know, something interesting, I was going to bring up the same exact play where he just fumbled it at his feet when you're in the paint. And you can't do that.
Why are you not moving?
You know what's funny? J.J. Starling, after that North Carolina game last Saturday, you know, he was getting interviewed, and he was asked, how does this team, what do they have to do to make the tournament, right? And he asked, he Starling said it comes down to who's willing to make a change and who is not. Now, to me, Starling's not the guy that he's going to maybe pick out certain individuals on the team that maybe aren't supplying the amount of energy or the contributions that you'd want to see on a squad. But to me, that indirectly says that there's some guys on this team that aren't buying into that product, or maybe what head coach Adrian Autry is providing them. Majstorovic, to me, is one of those guys who maybe isn't exactly bought in and night out. Coach Autry's had a lot to say to him. He's coached him up in the final minutes of these last several games, but I don't see Majstorovic changing a lot of his habits that he's had, and we only have 4 games left at this point in the season.
We got a text. Scooter wants to say that I think at the end of the season there has to be changes. Not Autry yet. Okay. I still say we don't have the right assistants, we being Syracuse. Need to hire a defensive specialist and obviously recruit better. Scooter actually is on the line right now, and he wants to talk to us about what he thought of this game. Scooter, what do you got for us?
A couple things. First of all, when team shoots 9 threes or over their skis, and you only have a 7-point lead at halftime, and you're on the road playing a better team, you kind of know you're in trouble because chances of them hitting 18, 20 threes in one game, especially a team that hasn't played a full 40 minutes, and that's exactly what happened. But the thing I wanted to point out, too, is this is the last 200 games in conference play. This is the 200th game. Syracuse is under 500. They've only won 99. Now they've lost 101. So you can tell the erosion has not just started this year. The erosion started maybe 7 or 8 years ago.
It's crazy to think about, Scooter, because this is a team not like 10 years ago was the number 1 team in the country. They showed a highlight on the ESPN broadcast of the crazy game winner in Pittsburgh that happened when Syracuse was the number 1 ranked team. It's just hard to imagine. If you told a Syracuse fan back then that it would be under 500 in conference play since joining the ACC, I imagine, I don't think anyone would believe you.
Yeah, but 2 years ago, they actually had the losing records. I thought talent-wise, they had less talent than this year. But the bottom line is that when Coach Boeheim, when started his career, he talked about because they couldn't win in the tournament in his first 10 years. He never won more than 1 game in the big tournament. He says you got to go by the regular season. Then all of a sudden you can't win in the regular season. If you remember his last 3 or 4 years, he said it's all about March. So it's amazing when you can't win one side, then you talk about the other side. So they really haven't done anything in the regular season. In the last 2 years they went to the Final Four. They were Cinderellas, right, guys?
Mm-hmm.
They played Virginia down 15 with 5 to go, and they ended up winning. And when they went and played when Louisville won it that year, Syracuse wasn't exactly supposed to be there. So the last 2 years in the Final Four, they were the Cinderellas.
Scooter, we appreciate the call. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. Have a great rest of your night. And he's got it. The other thing, Jish, this attendance has considerably dropped at home. Obviously, this is a road game tonight.
I don't want to talk about attendance for a
road
game.
But it's true. It portrays into what this team has gone through. You averaged 23,000 people a decade ago. Now you're bringing in 18,000 fans a game. It just keeps dropping and dropping. 20,000 last year, and the record shows for it. And Scooter brings up a good point about Boeheim and the reaching the tournament or even playing one game and being out of it. I can tell you right now, any Syracuse fan would die to see this team get in the NCAA tournament. Who cares what happens? You want to reach the tournament. If people are going to complain about getting to the tournament and losing one game, it's like your favorite professional sports team going to the playoffs and then losing the first game. I'd rather have that happen than you not make the playoffs forever. And this Syracuse team is we've hit rock bottom. We've hit rock bottom.
The difference is, we've said we've hit rock bottom as a Syracuse, for months now. The difference is between a pro sports team is when you lose, at least there's hope you can get a good draft pick. There's no light at the end of the tunnel for this Syracuse team. Scooter kind of alluded to it. Just the culture has shifted around this team. Those Cinderella teams that didn't care who their opponent was going to play a hard 40 minutes every night in, night out, those days are gone. And I don't know if that went with the coaching change, if Boeheim brought a locked-in team with him when he retired, or if this is just if the culture's just changed. That's really what it is. And if you want to talk about the culture or anything about the Syracuse basketball team, just like Scooter did, you want to talk about conference play like Scooter did, call into the show, 315-443-2011. Interact with us on social media at WAER Sports Talk. We've got our Sports Talk desk working tirelessly to get our show on the social media airwaves as well, so kudos to them. Please interact with it. It really does bring up a good point. Like, we don't necessarily have to talk about attendance if we want to talk about the culture shifting. When was the last time Syracuse played a full 40 minutes? Even in their wins this season, there have been stretches where they just get outplayed, even by teams like Lemoyne and Colgate from the beginning of the season. You remember that, Nico?
I remember.
We were both on that double overtime. It came down to the wire. That should have been the biggest red flag. There's no way Syracuse, forget March, forget what Scooter was talking about March. You got to win in February and January. Syracuse can't even do that anymore. It's atrocious, and all you have to do is look at this game and the second half effort. Listen, Nico, I didn't really believe in predetermination before watching this Syracuse team, but just like our first caller, Keith from Cazenovia, said, you just knew they were going to lose at halftime. There is a predestination for this team. It doesn't matter how well they play, Syracuse is going to find a way to lose. That never used to be the case, and that's why it's just so frustrating. Game in, game out, double overtime in, double overtime out. We sound like broken records just because of how can we convey this message enough? We can't.
We were talking about the same exact thing before this show. There's that feeling inside you where you think that this team is not going to pull out the win. And you brought up a couple minutes ago, Jish, when was the last time that Syracuse played a complete game and came out of it with a win?
You'll have to at least go to last year.
Because I'm looking down the schedule, I cannot pick out a game where Syracuse was maybe ahead in that first half and stayed ahead in the second half. It was either they came back from behind or they blew the lead after a first half lead like they did tonight. It's embarrassing. It's embarrassing to not even have a couple on the schedule for the entire season that you think would be able to win and play complete is embarrassing.
Ron from Syracuse is calling it the perfect timing because we're talking about how Syracuse can't play a full 40 minutes. Ron has the same exact take. Ron, what more can you add to this?
Hi, guys. When you said that, I was thinking, I just was going to say, why can't they play a 40-minute game? I mean, number one, the defenses seems to be terrible, and can't really stop anybody. And then to go along with that, like I said, the 40 minutes, like you mentioned, I guess, that they haven't. When was the last time that you remember them playing a good 40-minute game? I can't really remember that. The other thing is, we keep talking about where they need a few more wins to get in the ACC tournament. Do you really think it makes a difference? Yeah. Would you guys, even getting in the tournament and they win a couple of games, would they be competitive with the top teams in the ACC? And even those this year, I mean, is not the greatest. This is a proud program that really is not doing well. There was an article where the last time Syracuse was ranked, I couldn't believe it, how long it's been. That's unbelievable.
Exactly, Ron. Who cares at this point about the ACC tournament? It's not like every team's going to make a Cinderella run like NC State did last year. This Syracuse team, even if they do sneak into the last spot of the ACC tournament, you're right, Ron. Who cares? It's not going to matter. This team isn't making the NCAA tournament. It's a dead end. The ACC tournament is just another stage that Syracuse can get embarrassed on.
Yeah. It's sad, guys. It's when we were in the big, and I keep saying this, when we were in the Big East, I mean, we were a top dog always. And it's just like, I don't know, since we've gone into the ACC, we really haven't. In fact, go back over the ACC tournament over the years. Have we ever done anything in the ACC tournament?
I really can't think of anything. I mean, maybe the last time Syracuse had a losing season 2 seasons ago, had some noise. Maybe they could upset Duke this year. They couldn't. They lost to Duke in that one as well.
Yeah.
It's futile. And it's just so counterintuitive, too, because you think about those Big East rivalries, the physicalness of the Big East in the 80s, the Georgetown-Syracuse rivals, and then you move to more of I don't want to say a softer conference in the ACC, but one that Syracuse doesn't necessarily have the same hatred against these teams, and they just fall on their face. Do you think that they need a real solidified rival to get their fire back?
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess there could be. It's just, I just can't figure it out. I'm really kind of disappointed, and I don't know. I still, watch or listen to the games, but they all end up like the same. I mean, you have hope like tonight in the beginning, and then splat in the second half, and you say, what the heck is going on?
Ron, you brought up a good point a couple minutes ago about the defense maybe being the consistent factor for this team, not being the same team they were several years ago, even going back to the Big East Conference. What is it for you that you've seen either a culture change or an actual aspect change when it's on the floor, whether it's defense, offense? I said a few minutes ago this team is soft, and it's been soft for a little while. What do you see as the biggest change for you since this team was good?
Yeah, it's probably soft could be the word, I guess, and I'm not really sure. It's just, for some reason, number one, they just don't seem to put 40 minutes of good play together, and for the defense, it's just, I don't, a good example was when Carlos in the North Carolina game, when we had a really good chance, it was late in the game, if we got a stop, the guy just kind of blew by him, and it was like, even the announcers mentioned that's a move you can't let happen. And I don't know. And maybe, I wonder if there isn't some dissension with the team itself, with the players. It doesn't seem like, I don't know. It's hard to put a finger on.
I think that Elliot Cadeau's spin move on Jaquan Carlos might be tattooed in my brain for the rest of the time. Ron, thank you so much for your call.
Guys.
Have a great night, Ron. And if you want to call in like Ron, you can do so after this short break. 315-443-2011, the number to call. The only way you can get disappointed, Nico, is if there was something that that got your hopes up a little bit. And in the first half, there was a little bit of that. We're going to talk all about why maybe there was a little bit of hope in that first half. But first, we got a little bit of a pause to get through. So stay with us here on the Double Overtime. We're live until 11 o'clock. Don't go anywhere.
There is a one-stop listen for everything Syracuse athletics.
You got great talent on this offense. You can't go dormant for an entire quarter. And
the Ostrom Avenue podcast provides unique opinions, plus exciting interviews from industry experts.
Joined by Georgia Tech play-by-play broadcaster Andy Demetra, Syracuse.com, football beat reporter Emily Laker.
Check out weekly interviews on YouTube and listen at waer.org or wherever you get your podcast.
Start your Sunday mornings off right with Sunday Morning Gospel from 6 to 8 a.m. right here on WAER. Hosted by Cora Thomas, the program features some of the best local and national gospel artists. You'll hear everyone from Daryl Coley to the Brooklyn Tabernacle Choir to the Winans family. More information is available online at waer.org. Join us Sunday mornings from 6 to 8 a.m. for Sunday Morning Gospel on 88.3 FM WAER.
The National Institutes of Health is the largest funder of biomedical research in the world. It spends more than $30 billion a year towards grants researching cancer, cardiovascular diseases, and more. The Trump administration announced significant cuts to that funding. What does this mean for health and science research in the U.S.? That's next time on 1A.
Weekdays from 10 to noon on 88.3 WAER and streaming live on WAER.org.
Backs down on the baseline, little time left on the shot clock. Chris Bell heaves one, and it goes from deep. Just barely snuck it in.
One of the few bright spots in the first half. It was a bright first half. Second half, not bright for Syracuse tonight in an 80-69 loss to Pitt here on this Tuesday night. Nico Horning and Jis Sokolsky breaking things down here on the Double Overtime. We thank you for listening here on WAER. And we'd love to get your thoughts on the dominant first half for the most part tonight for the Orange compared to a second half letdown. A lot of that had to do with J.J. Starling not being a factor with 0 points for the majority of the second half. But again, as much as we put this team down a few minutes ago, there are some positives to take away from that first half. And if you at home have any of those positive notes that you'd like to share with us, you can call us at 315-443-2011. 2011. You can also text us at 315-556-3929. And if you want to go check out our socials, you can go to WAER Sports Talk. And also our YouTube live stream is up and running, WAER Sports Talk as well. Jish, we broke down the collapse there at the end of the game, but there are some positives to take away from that first half. A first half that I think a lot of Syracuse fans wish that this team could play with a lot more consistently and play that first half for 40 full minutes. Unfortunately, this team cannot do that at the moment.
You know, Nico, when we were watching that first half, we were planning to have this show be one where we kind of sing Syracuse's praises. Okay, this team can make a run, rah-rah. They were up 22-6 at one point.
And they looked like a completely different team.
We were saying to each other, where was this all season long? And then once halftime hit, we were saying, where's the first half team? Because this team in the first half...
False hope.
Exactly. You know, it looked like the team was gelling, like, you know, it was firing how it's supposed to in late February, representing that Block S. And the second half, it was like these guys had never met each other. It was unreal. I want to point out a specific play in the first half where I just had a smile on my face. I loved one of these Chris Bell threes where Syracuse just swung the rock around the bell like it was like this is what they practiced. There was a triple team in the paint on Eddie Lampkin, as there really should be. That guy is a dog down there.
Yep.
Good pass. Or it was actually, I think
it was Majstorovic.
They were triple teaming Majstorovic, which was a questionable
They want to
decision.
do that. Go ahead.
You know, we talk about how Pittsburgh adjusted their coaching in the second half. Yeah, they realized we don't have to triple team Majstorovic. In fact, we don't really have to guard him at all. Majstorovic, extra pass, swung it around. Jaquan Carlos, a drive, a kick. Bell finished the three. Poetry. That's how basketball's supposed to be played. Where was that all season? I have no idea. Where was it in the second half? Not to be found. Syracuse just went MIA.
The ball movement was great, especially on that Chris Bell three-pointer that you just pointed out, and Syracuse had that early lead. Unfortunately, they couldn't sustain it, but I'm like, if Chris Bell didn't make his three-pointers tonight, how much does this team get exposed in that first half? Because he made 4 3-pointers. That's 12 points. You know, Syracuse, even though they were up by, 22-6, up by, let's do my math, 16 points there. If Chris Bell doesn't make any of those threes, which there's been plenty of games that he hasn't this season, they're only up a few points. Then we're kind of back to where we started. So I think because of that, a lot of this first half has to be credited to Chris Bell and the way he was able to knock down the three ball. Are you with me?
I'm a little bit with you, but to me, it's kind of like
it looked different. But I'm still saying that
to me, yeah. And the way I'm visualizing this in my head, Nico, it's like those before and after pictures where it's just they put spray paints, like a spray tan on the guy, like for a workout program where it's like, oh, here's the before and after. It's like they just put spray tan on the Syracuse basketball team. That's really all Chris Bell did, because if he didn't shoot those threes, then Syracuse loses by 20 instead of 11. It doesn't feel any better. Like Chris Bell had a great effort-driven performance. There was, like, even the fouls he was committing, it was because he was hustling on the sideline. He was chasing loose balls and, you know, maybe a little too reckless, too careless, but you'll take that. My little league coach when I played tackle football would say, I don't care if you make mistakes as long as you make them at 100 miles per hour. Chris Bell made mistakes tonight, but he was making them at 100 miles per hour, and that's something we didn't see from anyone else on the team. And again, imagine a month ago, if we're praising Chris Bell for his body language and effort when a month ago that's all we could really talk about in the on these airwaves is how disconnected he felt. So, kudos to Chris Bell. He'll be great for a program that's not Syracuse next year when he, I don't want to speculate on another man's future, but it looks, I feel like his talents might be being wasted here at Syracuse.
Chris Bell, 14 first half points tonight, 23 points total in the game. Nico Horning and Jish Sokolsky breaking things down here as Syracuse falls to Pitt, 80-69. On the road, only 4 games remaining for Syracuse. Crazy to think that the season is almost over. I know a lot of people are excited for the season to almost be over based on the way that this year's played out so far. You mentioned some problems, not necessarily from Chris Bell, but from other players. In my opinion, one of those was J.J. Starling tonight. He did have a great first half.
Yeah.
He got the team going. He got himself going right away, which has been an issue as of late from half to half. For you at home, what did you see from J.J. Starling tonight? Getting going a little bit earlier on in the game, but also he did falter in that second half. And what do you think contributed to him scoring 0 points for the majority of that second frame? You can give us a call at 315-443-2011. Starling, I'm going to give you a couple numbers real quick.
I love numbers.
In the
Big
North
numbers,
Carolina game, J.J. Starling had 2 points in the first half.
Mm-hmm.
He ended up finishing with 22 points. That's 20 points in the second half. Okay? Today, he gets going right away with a three-pointer. Puts Syracuse up 3-0. Ends up with 14 first-half points. Very solid first 20 minutes of play.
Love it, JJ.
Despite the 5 turnovers he had. And then this guy is nowhere to be found in the second half. 0 points, and he gets his first point of the second half with a free throw, as Syracuse is already down by 9 or 10 points later on in that second frame. And he stopped driving to the basket. He stayed comfortable outside the arc, and it didn't work out for him. I don't understand this guy. He is a one-half player. He's a great player. He's a star of this team. But if he could play a full 40 minutes, I think this team would benefit from it.
We've listened to a lot of J.J. Starling here on WAER Syracuse all season long, and that's really been kind of the theme of him ever since he came back from his injury, really ever since Judah Mintz left. He's the epitome of what Syracuse basketball is. They live and die by J.J. Starling. When J.J. Starling plays well for a half, Syracuse plays well for a half. When J.J. Starling gets shut down or figured out or they give him extra defensive help, Syracuse shuts down. This team is so discombobulated. This team is so centered around its star, it's not even funny. J.J. Starling is the bellwether of this team. You can tell how Syracuse is going to play or how well they're going to do based on how well J.J. Starling does. And when he wasn't in the lineup for a month with his hand injury, it almost was like Syracuse wasn't playing at all. That was when they had their 30-point loss to Maryland, 30-point loss to Tennessee. And that's good for J.J., but not good for the team.
It's a problem. And you know what's funny is I came into the year with the proposal that I don't know if Starling could carry this team. I knew he was good. Everyone knew he was going to be good. I didn't think he was going to be this good and have some great performances in the last 3 weeks or in the last 3 games like he's had. 3 20-point performances, you're not going to complain about that at all, regardless of which half the points come in. But at the same time, it has turned into a problem where he turns on the Jets and the rest of the team seems like they turn off the Jets. So I don't know if there's a sort of combination issue there between Starling and his other offensive running mates because it seems like things are just not going well at the same time.
I think a big issue is that Syracuse at points doesn't know who's supposed to be running the ship. And we like to praise Eddie Lampkin. I'm going to kind of switch topics here a little bit because Eddie Lampkin sometimes, as a center, feels he has to play the role of facilitator when J.J. Starling is on the floor too. Eddie Lampkin is at his best when he's rolling towards the basket, when he's cutting, when he can catch and slam it. We saw that play to tie the game against UNC. We saw plenty of times in this first half as well where on the pick and roll, I think Syracuse should be a pick and roll team with JJ and Lampkin. Because when Lampkin is playing away from the basket, he's playing at the elbow, he's trying to hand off, he's trying to find, he's trying to pass to people, and he's not crashing the boards, he's not there. Syracuse really doesn't have another rebounder. J.J. Starling can do everything himself, but that doesn't mean your center should be doing what your point guard should be doing, and your point guard sure should not be doing what your center should be doing, and that's driving to the basket and creating looks with sheer physicality. So Lampkin needs to play that kind of role. Starling, just to allow Starling to do his thing.
Well, speaking of fundamentals and play calling, Keith is back here on WAER. And Keith, I know you want to talk a little bit about the fundamentals of the Syracuse squad with J.J. Starling and the rest of the offense. What have you seen from this team as of late?
Well, first of all, about Starling, I just have to say, you guys are talking about him being a one-half player. J.J. Starling has to realize he is the man, period, full stop. When he's out there, if he's got a shot, great, take it. If he can drive to the hole, take it. If he doesn't have it, facilitate. But he can't disappear for 20 minutes. He is the man. He's got to make things happen one way or the other. In regards to the fundamentals, we're talking about how Syracuse collapses and can't play a solid 40 minutes, and part of me has to wonder whether it comes down to simple fundamentals. I mean, in grade school, you're taught to put your hands up to contest a shot, right, to alter a shot. You box out when you're in the paint. You make sure your awareness on the court to make sure that you're not on the sideline in a corner so that when you're double-teamed, you're not coughing up the ball. Rotating off a player to help out somebody else who's been beaten. But you don't see Syracuse do that consistently. You see the teams that we play do all these little things that when they're accumulated together end up running us off the court. And that comes down to coaching, guys. And at the end of the day, if we have this lack of fundamentals for the program that we are, does that mean that we are not properly coached?
Well, that's a great question. And if you do believe this team is not properly coached, Keith, what do you think Syracuse should do about it? Because, can you really, I'm going to say it, can you really fire Autry with all the recruiting he's done? What does that do for the future of this program if you fire him? Like, is it worth it?
The question is Autry's, and this is not personal to him, he's a wonderful guy.
Of course.
But is Autry's value to the Syracuse program really as a assistant head coach and as a recruiter versus being the man? It's two very different roles, right? And you got to wonder sometimes when you see us getting out coached, and in a very fundamental way, like not doing the little things, not making adjustments, not looking at where we are after the first half, and then making an adjustment to continue to keep the foot on the gas, to put your foot on the neck of your opponent. Is it possible that the Autry experiment, no matter who we have a top 10 recruiting class coming in next season, right? But what is he going to do with it? And I guess the question is that is his real value for recruiting and to be that secondary voice on the bench, but not necessarily be the main guy?
Keith, I'm going to give you a proposal here real quick. Adrian Autry is a good recruiter. There's a couple good recruits coming in next year. Everyone knows that, despite the poor performance on the floor right now. You look at the football team and Fran Brown. Not only is a great recruiter, he shows in his first year that he can coach on the field and get his team ranked right off the bat. I don't know if that's a talent personnel issue that Syracuse basketball doesn't exactly have compared to the football team in the first year, but there's your example right there where, okay, maybe you can recruit all these guys that you want, but if you can't coach them, then there's an issue.
Right, and here's what I would say about that. I'm really glad you brought that up, because you know what Fran Brown has that Adrian Autry doesn't have? Fire and accountability, okay? And how many times are we going to hear Autry come up to the mic after a game and say, unacceptable? It is unacceptable, but what are you going to do about it? Fran Brown has got fire and accountability from the first practice out there. He's got the personnel, no doubt about it. I mean, you can't deny that. They have a great class coming in. He's had great recruits, great players. But he has a fire behind him. And I don't see the fire in Autry. And that doesn't necessarily mean you got to be yelling and screaming and do all that kind of stuff. But you do have to hold your players accountable, and you do have to make sure they do all the little things that make you successful. Fran Brown does that with the football team. I don't see that in Autry.
Right. No, you don't have to be like Micah Shrewsbury and just lose it at the podium every time. But it is really funny that you bring that up, Keith, that he does just come out and say it's unacceptable because this is your team, my friend. If it's unacceptable, then you, not anybody else, you have to fix it. You're the head coach. So it is really funny, and I love the Fran Brown accountability. That's part of Dart. I feel like you just can't compare apples to oranges here, only because they're such different personalities.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. And your point about you being the one in control, that yes, you have to do something about it. I could not agree more. And at the end of the day, look, I think he's a wonderful guy, but is he the guy to lead this program going forward? Now, we got a good recruiting class coming in. Maybe Keon Anthony and company are looking at this thinking, we're going to be the guys, right? They're going to come in with the mentality that we're going to be the guys to turn Syracuse around and take us back to the glory days. But the question is, in this day and age with NIL and the portal and how teams just restock and reload. The other thing about this that drives me nuts about Syracuse is that, we talk about, okay, it takes a while to gel, it takes a while for players to get to learn to play together, but every other team in basketball has to deal with the same problem, right? They figure it out. And for whatever reason, Syracuse can't figure it out. And that comes down to the coaching, and not necessarily the head coaching, but the coaching staff in particular, right? And so I don't know about this crew that's coming in next year. And maybe they've got the mentality that they're going to be the ones that are just going to light it up and take us to the promised land again. But I don't know. I just don't know that we've got the right staff in place to pull that off.
Well, it's a lingering question heading into the offseason. Keith, thanks for the call back. Please give us a call for a future show. Love hearing your thoughts, and he's spot on.
Keith is welcome anytime in this show.
Definitely.
Twice is better. And it's an interesting proposition. I want to bring up something like, what if...
Sure.
Because Syracuse basketball does have a general manager, as you kind of need one in this NIL era. If the only excuse to keep Autry around is his recruiting, but we can all almost agree that the adjustments haven't been there. The X's and O's, the kind of freewheeling style that worked under Boeheim isn't working under him. Why doesn't Syracuse, and this might sound crazy, just make him the general manager of the team? If he's some recruiting aficionado, but doesn't really have that dog mentality as a head coach, one that can really, like that Rick Pitino je ne sais quoi about him, why don't they just make him the general manager and bring in somebody who's going to instill a fire defensively under this team, or keep the fire going? Because,
well, if you're the head coach of a basketball team, I feel like you got to be able to coach what you have on the floor, regardless of what your product is. As Syracuse falls to Pitt tonight, 80-69. Nico Horning and Jish Sokolsky breaking down this one and getting into a little bit of not necessarily future conversations, but coaching / recruiting. Where in the world is this team, and why can't Syracuse figure it out at the moment with 4 games to go in the regular season? I'd love to hear from you guys at home about this Adrian Autry, Fran Brown sort of proposition. Should Autry, I'm not necessarily saying that this guy is going to get fired, and it's in my opinion, it's too early to tell what he can do with this team because he's only been here for 2 years, correct? But at some point, you do have to come out with a different answer. You got to make more adjustments. Fran Brown seemed to make some adjustments pretty quickly. Different sports, I get it, you can't compare it all the time. But what do you guys think at home? Please give us a call again, 315-443-2011. You can also text us at 315-556-3929. I think you bring up a beautiful point, Jish.
Beautiful.
Thank you. That Autry, maybe he takes this sort of other, I don't know, recruitment role or something, and you have a guy that's maybe a bit more comfortable coaching in certain circumstances. And again, this is nothing against Adrian Autry, but at some point you got to see some sort of change, whether it's an adjustment in game or with the personnel.
It ties into our discussion from the top of this segment, Nico, because I want to just point to the defense in particular. Let's get microscopic about this. We've been very vague and abstract about this. Let's look at the defense. First half, first few possessions, Syracuse is telegraphing passes, stealing the ball, pushing in transition, really looking like the Syracuse of last year when Judah Mintz was doing this and Malik Brown was doing this. They were doing that to start. 5 steals in the first half. Pittsburgh, one of the best teams at holding on to the ball, was turning it over because the players saw something. When Pitt makes an adjustment, when Pitt hits you with the counterpunch, you can't just cower away in fear. You have to adjust yourself. If you're not going to get steals anymore, if you're not going to do that, what do you do? We can't claim to have the answers. We don't coach basketball. We don't know how hard it is. But if you are being paid to be a basketball coach at a Power 5 university, not just a Power 5 university, but a basketball school, a team with a heavy tradition of great defensive play, whether it's, the 2-3 zone maybe got faded out in the 3-point era, whatever. Great defensive play, great heart, great effort. What are you doing to uphold that tradition if you're getting paid the big bucks to do so? That involves you saying, hey, okay, this is what worked. This is what we're going to keep doing. Okay, if they make this adjustment, this is how we're going to respond. We can't say that he's making no adjustments. We're not there in the locker room. But if they're not working, you cannot be set in your ways. You have to be as flexible as they come and play to your personnel. You cannot just not do anything.
And part of the coaching revolves having your squad play a full 40 minutes. That's the next step for this team. And for them to still have that next step with 4 games to go is pretty embarrassing. You mentioned that Syracuse defense looked great right off the jump. I mean, even the threes that Pitt was knocking down, like a Jalen Lowe 3 midway through the first half.
And in his face.
Exactly. Didn't even dribble, left wing, few feet beyond the arc.
What are you going to do?
What are you going to do about it? That's the type of shots that you want these other teams taking.
Yes.
Unfortunately, again, that defense only lasted for a few minutes, and Syracuse let up in the second half again.
I like that point, Nico. They were taking weird middies to start the game, and they were not falling, obviously, because that's an inefficient shot.
It's one thing to have the shots fall. It's another thing to allow open shots.
Right.
And
it's also just a misunderstanding of the personnel this team has, because in the first half, there weren't a ton of double teams, help defense. Second half, I was seeing triple teams down low. You have Eddie Lampkin and Jair Davis down there. They'll be fine. If you're Lucas Taylor, if you're J.J. Sterling, if you're Kyle Cuff, or if you're Jaquan Carlos, you do not need to crash inside to double team these bigs. Your bigs got it. Stay on your men. The Pittsburgh had like 3 threes in a row out of the second half because of these switches that were just so unnecessary. And that is an indictment on your coach. That is your coach has to call a timeout there and says, guys, what are you doing? Stay on these shooters. They're hot. They're even adding with their hands in their face. Make it as difficult as possible. They were getting easy looks in the second half. That's why Syracuse fell apart. That's why the defense fell apart. And that's just, if we can diagnose this as viewers, the coach has to be able to diagnose that.
Well, you know what they say, it starts at the top, and unfortunately Syracuse is facing some hardships right now, and there's no answers for any of this, but one guy that might have some answers after attending the Syracuse and Pitt press conference is Shrikar Rajendran. We'll get him on the line here in just a couple of minutes after we step aside. Syracuse falls to Pitt tonight 80-69, and looking for some sort of hope here in the last few games of the regular season. Again, Shrikar Rajendran will join us after this quick timeout. You're listening to the Double Overtime here on WAER.
Thanks for listening. We hope you're enjoying this WAER sports broadcast. Our sports staff goes where the teams go, home and away, and prepare for days before each game broadcast. Our talk show and podcast hosts analyze games, pore over stats, and keep up on sports trends. These and many behind-the-scenes opportunities are made possible by listener donations. So if you're a fan or an alum, donate to keep our sports legacy strong at WAER.org and click Donate.
I'm Asma Khalid. The Trump administration is trying to shut down the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. A senior official who was recently let go is sounding the alarm, saying the agency provides vital protections for all Americans. The fate of the CFPB, next time on Here and Now.
Weekdays from noon to 2 on 88.3 WAER.
As German voters head to the polls, the country's economy is still in a recession.
Globalization is in retreat. Chinese want to produce for themselves, Americans want to produce for themselves. The euro is still there, okay? We have to take care of our own military now, and the cheap energy supplies from Russia are gone as well.
That story on the next Morning Edition from NPR News.
Weekdays from 5 to 9 on 88.3 WAER.
Lampkin to Davis, down low, flips it up, and it's blocked at the rim. Zach Austin, the SWAT team, went to that one, and here comes Jalen Lowe. Corhen to Leggett, the triple. Oh, yeah! 10-0 run, including a pair of triples from Ish Leggett. It's 63-56 with 8:20 to go. Pitt on top of Syracuse here as crunch time is quickly approaching.
Oh yeah, Jonah, I would say, oh no, Syracuse falls to Pittsburgh 80-69. It's 5th straight game, giving up 80 points this time on the road in Pittsburgh. I'm Josh Sokolsky, joined by Nico Horning, and Syracuse did not give us a lot to talk about. Well, they gave us a lot to talk about down in Pittsburgh, but what we can give you down in Pittsburgh is our reporter, Shrikar Rajendran. It's a reunion of the first double overtime of this basketball season. Me, Nico, and Shrikar broke down everything about this team back then. We had a ton of concerns back then, and Shrikar, I really don't think a lot of them have dampered as the season has rolled on.
Jish, I'm so honored you remembered that.
Of course I do. That was a fun show.
I mean, it's always great to be here. Pittsburgh, not really different weather-wise than Syracuse. I'm always jealous of a lot of reporters on this show, always bragging about the weather and, oh, it's better than Syracuse. I can't wait to go back. It's not much different.
Have you been in Syracuse lately? They're calling states of emergencies in our neighboring counties. I think it's probably
stay
better.
Safe.
Yeah,
stay
no,
safe.
we're doing fine up here, Shrikar. But I feel like the Syracuse basketball team should probably also call a state of emergency. This season's a wash. We're already kind of looking forward to next season. Just, is there any sign of life that you can point to? Because we were kind of struggling to point to any sign of life in this second half, Shrikar. Did you see anything? Maybe on the bench, maybe within the crowd. in the second half.
I'm with you guys. I think it's very hard to find silver linings in a game like this because of how detrimental it is from a momentum perspective. All right, SU started out this game with their biggest lead of the game. It was 16 with about 11 minutes to go in the first half. Pitt's biggest lead was at the end of the game with about a minute to go. I feel like that is just crazy to me. And I don't think it's acceptable by any standards. It's not the standards that Syracuse basketball should be playing at. And you're right to be a little bit frustrated and a little bit mad at this game. But if you wanted me to point at one silver lining in this game, it's that Chris Bell at least stayed somewhat consistent in the second half. He had a hot start. Him and J.J. Starling were both really going off from three. But in that second half, as the rest of the team faltered, it did feel like Chris Bell was still hitting a couple big shots and at least keeping the team within the game. But look, this game was all about setting a pace and maintaining it. I tweeted about it on the Sports Talk account. You can follow us on Twitter at WAER Sports Talk. But I tweeted that setting a pace and maintaining it, two different things entirely. And that's been the challenge for Syracuse. Adrian Autry said in the presser, this team battled for 27 to 28 minutes, but it's a 40-minute game.
Yes.
And therein lies the issue. You got to play a complete game. It's something that Syracuse hasn't really found yet, and this deep into the season, huge concern.
Folks, you're not hearing a broken record. We all kind of think the same thing. Syracuse can't play 40 minutes, except for, I guess, Chris Bell tonight. If you agree with those statements or you disagree, or if you have a question for our very own reporter down in the zoo in Pittsburgh, you can call into the show 315-443-2011, or you can text us 315-556-3929. You're saying the exact same things we're talking about, Shrikar. Chris Bell, this is a welcome sign from him, but it's really just too little too late.
No, it totally is. And you asked me to find a silver lining. This is
that's on me.
Silver lining I can give. No. I think it's a great question. But that really explains this whole game. When you're struggling to find a silver lining in a loss, usually you'll have something to work off of. But we're this deep into the season, and in a game like this, again, it's demoralizing completely.
Well, so Shrikar, you mentioned the full 40 minutes. That's literally what Jish and I have been talking about for most of the show, is Syracuse's inability to play a complete game.
Yeah.
We see a complete game from Chris Bell. I don't see a complete game from anyone else. And one guy I want to point to is J.J. Starling, because he seems to keep having a great half and then not having a great half, or vice versa, in which that was the case tonight, where he scored double-digit points in the first half and then didn't score a single point in the second half until couple minutes to go in the game at the free throw line.
Nico, I think that's only amplified because he is the perceived leader of this team. The rest of the team, I wouldn't say necessarily follows behind J.J. Starling, but they move as he moves, right? If J.J.'s not
Just
going,
like
it's been a problem all season that where is that secondary scoring option going to come from? If J.J.'s not hot, who is going to be hot? And in this game, I do agree, J.J. Starling had a great first half. I mean, he was shooting the lights out. Second half kind of had a disappearing act.
He got too comfortable beyond the arc, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And that was a big issue with this game as well, shot selection.
Yep.
I think in the first half, even in the first half, the shot selection wasn't too great because it seemed like on some shots they were just heaving it and it somehow made its way into the hoop.
Yeah.
And Adrian Autry actually would disagree with all three of us because he thought that this team had great shots and great looks in the first and second half.
Actually, I think he does have a point. They weren't hitting open shots tonight, Shrikar. I think back to J.J. Starling missing a wide-open one in the second half at the top of the key. I think back to Peter Majstorovic. Don't even get me started on Peter Majstorovic. I don't know what he's doing out there. Just another quick sidebar. We talk about how great of a recruiter Adrian Autry is. Peter Majstorovic will always be a stain on that record of him being a great recruiter. Sidebar over. He missed an open three-pointer as well. So the shot selection, I don't even know if that was the main issue. I think they got lucky in the first half with some of the bad ones going in, but the good shot selection just wasn't going in. It's perplexing.
It shouldn't even come down to shot selection, in my opinion. This team should have drove down the lane like Starling was doing, even though he did hit some three-pointers in the first half. He should have been driving in that second half as well, staying aggressive and not getting comfortable. That was the entire issue with the second half, in my opinion.
For sure. Nico, I'll get to your point in a bit, but Jish, I think the issue with the bigs on this team is that they're just kind of using up space, and there's not much going on when they're on the court. I don't know if you get what I mean.
I do.
But when you're on the court, it's not just about off-ball movement. It's about on-ball movement. It's about what you're doing at every single moment of a possession, and that's always going to determine how good the possession ultimately is.
Shrikar, have you ever seen the movie? Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off.
No, of course.
Have
go
you ever
ahead.
seen the movie The Longest Yard? By any
Adam,
chance?
Adam Sandler?
Yes, that one.
Yes.
You know,
yes,
you
I
know the
have.
character Sikowski. You know the big giant, the lovable guy who I just don't think he doesn't really realize how strong he is. He doesn't realize how big he is. He's accidentally hurting people. Syracuse's bigs do not realize how big they are, in my opinion. Shrikar, I don't see Eddie Lampkin in the paint nearly enough. Jair Davis was bullying people early in the season. I don't know where that went. I don't want to go back to the North Carolina game, but that's a very undersized team. Syracuse finally realized, okay, wait, we're bigger than these guys. Let's dominate down low. Syracuse has the size to dominate down low, and that's something we were also talking about on the Lemoyne dot however long ago. The bigs should be the strength of this team. And yes, you're right with the off-ball movement. It seems like the guards kind of run around the top of the key. These bigs got to cut into the paint. They got to bully. They are not bullies. They are lovable giants who go in there and don't really, in my opinion, they don't show the strength that they have.
Jish, I know a lot of Giants. I know the San Francisco Giants. I know the New York Giants. I know Andre the Giant. But these Giants, man, I tend to agree. It's tough. And Jeff Capel actually said in his post-game press conference, we didn't even talk about Eddie Lampkin and how they actually played up on him and how they decided to, go about defending him this time around. Last game, or the last time that Pitt and Syracuse faced off, I mean, Eddie Lampkin was a beast on the boards. He had 23 boards, still his career high. And this game, it was more about, okay, Eddie is a big dude. So it was more of, can the team help out whoever is on Eddie Lampkin? Team rebounding was the key in this game, and it totally worked. We didn't see as much dominance from Eddie Lampkin because everyone was swarming. Everyone from Pitt was playing together as a team. Okay, if this guy's on Eddie Lampkin, I'm going to go ahead and try and help him out if the ball's up in the air. Because if there's a loose ball, you are always going to be taught as a professional to jump for it, no matter what. You got to have that instinct within you. And if everyone on the court has that same instinct and is playing in a certain rhythm, what much more can Eddie Lampkin do?
It's a great point because Lampkin went off last time. You just outlined it, Shrikar, and Pitt did a great job at stopping him. And on the other hand, I think Pitt did a good job at stopping Starling in that second half when they needed to. Unfortunately, Syracuse couldn't do so in the second half. Nico Horning, Jish Shikolsky, and Shrikar Rajendran, our talk reporter in Pittsburgh after Syracuse falls to Pitt tonight, 80-69. Shrikar, speaking of personnel and everything, Elijah Moore ruled out before the game with a right leg injury. Was he on the bench? What did you see him do? Was he moving around? You have any update there with Elijah Moore?
So Coach Autry gave some insight in the post-game press conference. He said he's very hopeful that Elijah Moore will be back next game. They are going to evaluate over the next couple practices, see where he's at, and they're going to go from there. And it does seem like he's hopeful he's going to be back. You can only take my word and Adrian Autry's word for what it is, but that's what has been told to the media.
It's been a very weird year for Syracuse injuries, Shrikar, hasn't it? Like we were told J.J. Starling would be out till like mid-January. He comes back first game of January.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
We're told Donnie Freeman's day-to-day for like 3 weeks.
Sidelined for the rest
then
of the
he's
season.
out for the year. I really don't believe anything. I will believe it when I see it with Elijah Moore. And, there's a reason we haven't really talked about him on the show. I really don't think if Elijah Moore played or if he was on the bench that it would have made a difference. There's something culturally wrong with this team. We can't quite put a finger on it. We're not at practice. We're not in the locker room. But the product that is being put on the floor just reeks of bad culture. And Elijah Moore, unfortunately, he's a talented player, has shown really great flashes, but he wouldn't change anything, even if he was playing next game.
Well, you mentioned the culture. Another thing that Autry said was the attitude in the locker room.
Attitude.
Disappointed. He said the team is disappointed, but they're going to regroup. They're going to keep fighting. He said, this is life. You can't quit. You have to keep battling. So, again, take it with a grain of salt. But this is what, if you want an insight into what the culture is looking like, this team has 4 games left. They're going to play hard for all 4 games. They're going to keep going. They're going to keep battling. So, I do agree, though. Elijah Moore, don't think he would have been enough of a spark to really save Syracuse in this one, but I do think it would have been a little interesting because maybe he could have been the answer to some of these pit runs because, we'll look at it this way.
Streetcar, you had 2 points last game. I don't buy that.
I disagree with the Elijah Moore thing, I will say. I don't think he has much impact on this. Streetcar, before you keep going about that, I got to respond to to what Autry said. Can you repeat exactly what he said about the culture again?
Well, yeah, he said the locker room was disappointed. They're going to regroup.
This sounds like the same message we hear game in and game out. I'm tired of it. I gotta be damn honest. I don't know. There's got to be a different message, and there's got to be adjustments on the court or in the locker room. It seems like guys aren't bought in. That's my issue. And yeah.
Well, Nico, it does feel like they're just playing out the string here, and that's not really the best vibes. But, again, I have to take what Adrian Autry says at face value. And if that's truly what the locker room is feeling, who knows? Maybe they can come out the next game and put on an even better performance. But, for now, it's more so you just kind of wait and see with this team. And the more that we wait and see, the more that we get more of the same. So it's a little bit of a loop.
If the team's disappointed, how are you feeling, Adrian Autry? Do you I know you keep saying it's unacceptable. It's unacceptable. I'm sorry, it's unacceptable. When are you going to do something about it? You can't just keep blasting the players' attitudes. You cannot just keep saying the team's disappointed, but they have to move on. They have to grow up, blah, blah, blah. When do you accept some blame? I really, I know he does. He says this one's on me. I want you to mean it. You know what I mean? I feel just I don't want to call him disingenuous or dishonest because I don't necessarily believe that, but I want to feel it with you, man. I really want to, but I don't feel it from you.
Well, the only way we're going to feel what someone else says is if we can actually transport into their mind and figure out what they said.
Yeah, of course.
So I do kind of have to disagree there that Autry can say what he wants, but we're never going to know what he's actually feeling, and I think that's always going to be an unknown, right? You tell the media what you tell them, but beyond that, we don't know, we can't judge, we can't say anything about it. But, again, with Elijah Moore, I'm sorry, I got to go back to it.
Go ahead.
I do think he could have at least staved off some of these pit runs. I'm not saying he would have, but I'm saying if there's no silver linings in this game, maybe Elijah Moore would have been that silver lining. I think there is at least a chance because, look, this was a momentum-based game. Shout out to Uncle Mo. I shout him out in every double overtime, but Uncle Mo is a real thing. Momentum, real thing, right? I do think that look, I know you do, Nico, but look, maybe when he's back, we'll see how much minutes he gets because that's another question. If he was really active for this game, we know he was injured. How many minutes would he really have gotten?
Yeah.
I think that's another question we have to throw out there. But
sorry, go ahead.
But yeah, this team, it's really just playing out the string down the last few games.
I see what you mean, maybe with the shooting, but I don't think the shooting really was the issue tonight. It was the defense, and Elijah Moore doesn't give you really much on defense.
Well, I think it was both because they did, as you said, they got open looks and they missed them.
Elijah Moore misses open looks more than anyone on the team, Shrikar. I mean, I can't help but disagree with you on that one. Elijah Moore gets open, he misses them too.
No, again, I'm not saying he would have 100% made a difference, but you start to wonder the possibilities if he was out there. And you start to wonder about how different things, such as floor spacing, such as, the whole game and the whole kind of outcome could have been a little different.
I think it's a testament to the state of the program that we're wondering what would happen if Elijah Moore played tonight, if that maybe would have made this any better. I disagree. I don't know where Nico stands.
I'm with. Well, I don't want to give my 2 cents on Moore. I think we shouldn't even be talking about that. But I do agree with Shrikar that it was both sides of the ball tonight, defensively in the second half, but also Syracuse should have been a lot more aggressive offensively and shouldn't have let this thing slip away like they did.
Well, Shrikar, we really do appreciate your insight, but we've just about exhausted all the time here. There's only about 27 more minutes left on this double overtime, and according to Adrian Altria, Shrikar just told us that was the amount of time Syracuse basketball played basketball tonight. So let's see if Nico and I can play out a strong enough 27 minutes to bring this one home until 11 o'clock. We've still got plenty more fun on the double overtime when we return. Not a lot of fun watching this Syracuse game. An 80-69 loss to Pittsburgh. Stay tuned. We'll be right back after this.
The National Institutes of Health is the largest funder of biomedical research in the world. It spends more than $30 billion a year towards grants researching cancer, cardiovascular diseases, and more. The Trump administration announced significant cuts to that funding. What does this mean for health and science research in the U.S.? That's next time on 1A.
Weekdays from 10 to noon on 88.3 WAER and streaming live on WAER.org.
We know you've got a lot to do in a day, and sometimes it may not be easy to tune in at exactly the right time to catch WAER News. But WAER News is always available, wherever and whenever you are, without a paywall. Visit our website to use our live stream or catch up on local and national news, as well as podcasts on our website at WAER.org.
There is a one-stop listen for everything Syracuse athletics.
You got great talent on this offense. Like, you can't go dormant for an entire quarter. And
the Ostrom Avenue podcast provides unique opinions, plus exciting interviews from industry experts.
Joined by Georgia Tech play-by-play broadcaster Andy Demetra, Syracuse.com, football beat reporter Emily Laker.
Check out weekly interviews on YouTube and listen at WAER.org or wherever you get your podcast.
We know you've got a lot to do in a day, and sometimes it may not be easy to tune in at exactly the right time to catch WAER News. But WAER News is always available, wherever and whenever you are, without a paywall. Visit our website to use our live stream or catch up on local and national news, as well as podcasts on our website at WAER.org.
Jaquan Carlos quickly steals a pass, just no focus as he lays it up. Another grievous turnover for the home team.
Back here on the double overtime, Syracuse loses to Pitt tonight, 80-69 on the road. Syracuse with 4 games remaining in what has been a very, very disappointing season. Nico Horning and Jish Shikolsky here in the WAER studios, and Jish, we've covered quite a bit tonight, whether it's offense, whether it's defense, whether it's a great first half, but not a great second half, where Syracuse let this thing slip away tonight down in Pittsburgh. Syracuse actually had a 7-point lead in the first and then got outscored by 18 in the second half. That was the story of the game. Whether you want to look at the offense or the defense, Syracuse loses another once again. But enough of this year. Let's get on to maybe
it's already over.
It's already
anyway,
over.
Right?
It's already over. A few more games. ACC tournament this, ACC tournament that. What does Syracuse need to do next year? We're gonna play a little game. We're gonna go shopping. All right.
Yeah.
It's hard to get in the car and go shopping right now because of all the snow and the ice on the ground based on the weather conditions.
We're going online, baby.
We're going online. We're going online. That's what a lot of people do nowadays. So that's what we're gonna do, and we're gonna pick 2 items each that we're gonna put in our shopping cart that Syracuse needs to pick up for next year. And I'm going to give you your first item. You can go anywhere in the store, any aisle. Where are you going?
You know, I think Syracuse did a lot of shopping this offseason, but it's showing more and more that Syracuse went to Goodwill instead of going to a place like a Whole Foods or something like that. I know those are 2 different stores, but you're going to have to stick with me here. Syracuse, in this portal, went after a lot of seniors, and those seniors are not going to be here next year, whether that's Eddie Lampkin, Jair Day. I mean, there's a chance some of these guys have a red shirt, use extra eligibility, whatever. They could come back. But Jair Davis is a senior, Lucas Taylor is a senior, Jaquan Carlos is a senior, Eddie Lampkin's a grad student, so I believe he's out of here. I 2 of those names, Jair Davis, Eddie Lampkin, if they're both gone, Syracuse needs to whip out the old ShopRite shopping cart, go to Wegmans, and pull out an athletic center off of the shelves. Because this team, I think its strength can be the pick and roll. J.J. Starling's a good enough distributor, and you know we'll talk a little bit about point guards later, but if this team runs a pick and roll, it's going to need an athletic center. And, those are hard to come by. Those might be premium items. But you want, after this year, with a more cerebral center like Eddie Lampkin, who plays more outside the painted area and hands the ball off and passes more than he can dunk. I want a center who's kind of a high flyer. I want a center who can sky up for blocks, has good defensive instincts, and is just an athlete. You know what I mean?
A little more of a Jesse Edwards kind of frame?
A little more of a Jesse Edwards, sure. I don't want this guy to necessarily get bullied down low the way Jesse Edwards did at times 2 seasons ago. I want this center to be able to make plays above the rim. Really, I think Syracuse, if it had that this year, would be much more suited to go on runs and to win games and to just maintain momentum, to maintain its toughness. This team should be built around its 5, and right now it's not.
So you're dissing Eddie Lampkin a little bit.
I'm not. No, I don't want this to come across as me dissing Eddie Lampkin. I think that Eddie Lampkin has been the best or second best player on this team this year, but I don't think he does the right thing as a center. I think he's one of the best players on this team, but I'd like to see him roll to the basket more, play above the rim, catch lobs. When was the last time you ever saw Eddie Lampkin finish an alley-oop?
Very true.
It's one of the most electric plays. That gets any crowd into it. You don't get that from Eddie Lampkin, unfortunately. So I want Syracuse to go to Wegmans and get them a nice athletic center and cruise off into the sunset here.
Well, I don't disagree with you on the athletic center stance, but I do think Eddie Lampkin has provided something that Syracuse has really needed this season, and that is a presence in the paint. That's rebounding. And I know you're not.
He's going to be gone.
You're not
too,
disallowing that. Correct. That's where we're going with this is next year. So I agree with you. Syracuse needs that little high flyer guy. I love the way you worded that. I'm going to go with the complete opposite position, and that is a point guard. Syracuse does not need a point guard. They got Starling. They need a backup.
Right.
All right. Jaquan Carlos has not done it for me this season.
No, he has
And
not.
I think many, many people would agree with that. There's a lot of talk at the beginning of the year that this guy was going to be this great sort of second guy, this distributor, transfer from Hofstra, played there the last 3 years, and ended up averaging a little over 6 assists last year with Hofstra. And I thought he was going to be more of a distributor as well this year, but unfortunately he's only averaging a little over 3.5 assists this season. Jaquan Carlos has not done the job for me. I think Syracuse needs a new backup point guard that they can sort of go to next season. And it's not going to be Carlos. It's got to be someone else. You need that other guy where it's not a complete drop-off from J.J. Starling.
I like how you specified a backup point guard because Jaquan Carlos at Hofstra was the guy. He was the guy who was distributing. He was out there 40 minutes. And Syracuse tried that when J.J. Starling was out.
And you know what? Maybe it just doesn't fit in the style that Jaquan Carlos plays with.
Yeah,
so maybe you can't fully blame the guy. But based on the situation, you need someone new.
He's a smaller guy, and he can't really play defense. And he doesn't really shoot that well either. We got Mike from Manlius on the line as well, who wants to talk a little bit more about three-point shooting. Mike?
How you guys doing?
Doing great. How are you doing, Mike?
Very good.
As good as we can after the loss. Right, exactly.
So my point was that SU falls in love with the three-pointer in the first half, and I'll tell you why I think it falls apart in the second half. I think that SU has a hard time protecting the rim on defense.
Mm-hmm.
So they get frustrated, but they don't get frustrated at the opposing team. They get frustrated at themselves. And that kind of creates a little bit of dissension in the ranks, and that stymies their three-point shooting in the second half.
Well, you know what? I think Chris Bell, even though he had a great game tonight, I think he's shown examples of that in the past, where if he's not making his threes or something's not going right, he'll talk to himself. He'll get down. He'll go sit on the bench right away during a timeout.
They should get mad at the opposing team, in my opinion.
Yeah, where's the fire? Where's that dog? You know what I mean?
Right.
Like we kind of had this conversation earlier. Back when they were in the Big East, they hated their opponents. They really did. They don't got that fire. They don't got that hate, Mike.
Yeah, it's just because the whole team has been kind of down lately, and it was all tracing back to a game versus St. John's where Chris Mullen was the coach, and SU just couldn't protect the rim. And ever since then, SU's had this weakness in the second half that they get frustrated at themselves instead of at the opposing team. So go back and watch that sometime. The Chris Mullen game, I think Battle was a freshman.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much that Syracuse can do. I think, when Syracuse expects that much of itself, sometimes you want to point the blame at yourself and not at the other team. And I think there is a time and place for that for sure. I think Syracuse should be frustrated at itself with the performance it's given, especially if you're missing open threes.
Yes. Yep. Correct. Right on, guys.
Well, Mike, appreciate the call.
No problem.
Enjoy the rest of your night, and stay warm out there here in pretty chilly Syracuse. Although I didn't mention this to Shrikar a few moments ago, our talk reporter that joined us. It's actually colder in Pittsburgh today than it was here.
Oh.
Very surprising.
Probably not the same amount of wind.
Yes, that's oh my gosh, that makes the biggest difference.
Syracuse could have used some of the wind in its sail.
Uh-huh.
I'm glad Mike called when he did, because I think that brings up your next shopping cart list.
Literally. And that, again, Jish and I are breaking down this the shopping list, putting some items in our cart for next season, since this one's pretty much wrapped up and sealed with 4 games remaining. Syracuse standing at 15th out of 18 ACC spots to make the tournament. All right, my second, whatever you want to call this, item on the going on the cart is that Syracuse either needs a sharpshooter or another dog for next season. Now, what I mean by that is you have Chris Bell. I would consider Chris Bell a sharpshooter when he's on. We saw it tonight. Chris Bell with 7 3-pointers? Great outing from him from beyond the arc. But there's other nights where you don't get that. And I'd like to see that 3-point contributions come from somebody else. If you don't go out and get that, give me another Eddie Lampkin type of player, type of attitude, type of mentality. Because this team is soft. And I think Lampkin brings a lot of fight game in and game out, whether he's having his best night or he's not. And I think there's too many guys that are not exactly that, bring that toughness that you want from a guy. I think of a Patrick Beverley in the NBA, where that he's one of a kind, a Draymond Green. But you want someone with that next level of toughness, and I think Lampkin has brought that this year from Colorado, a team that made the March Madness tournament last year. And if Syracuse can pick up one more of those guys, they'd be in a good spot.
You're right, Nico. I mean, I feel like this is what Elijah Moore was kind of supposed to be, the sharpshooter, the dog. His nickname is Choppa. Like, this is a guy who you're supposed to have come in and give you that dog mentality.
I don't see it.
Yeah, I really don't see it either. Syracuse needs to definitely put that on the shopping list. It doesn't matter how much it costs you. Get that sharpshooter in the building. Get another dog in the building, because Syracuse is one of the worst shooting teams. Lest we forget, don't let Chris Bell's performance tonight distract you. Don't let a Lucas Taylor performance distract you.
No,
this
100%.
isn't a good shooting team.
No, it's not. Not at all. You either need a shooter, you need some more toughness, and you need some more shooting. I think we can both agree on that. Hey, if you want to add to our shopping cart at home, or add your own item, or go to the self-checkout line, you can give us a call at 315-443-2011. Jish, you got your second item. What would that be?
Sure. Yeah, and this is an item they already have, but it's someone who they definitely need to buy back, and it's something we see over and over and over. I feel like their subscription to J.J. Starling might be expiring soon, and I don't want to say that Starling, the hometown kid. I'm not going to speculate he's going to leave. I don't think that'll happen, but they need him to buy in for a last year, right? He probably doesn't have any NBA aspirations or prospects at this point. They need him to buy back in for this next year. Right now, they've put out an uninspiring performance. Like, if I were J.J. Starling personally, I wouldn't want to stick around. So I think just this kind of is an overarching thing. Syracuse needs to buy pieces that will complement J.J. Starling. They need to buy floor spacers, like you said. They need to buy people who will lighten the load for J.J. Starling. Almost like another Judah Mintz. When Judah Mintz was here, he was kind of someone who could, at times, take away things for J.J. Starling. So in order to buy back J.J. Starling, you need to buy a lot of things, each part sold separately, if you will. And that's the way you get J.J. Starling back, because right now, as we're looking at Syracuse on February 18th, 2025, he's the only thing providing any sort of fight. Buy him back right now. Renew that subscription, or else.
Or else. You need more compliments around him. And we'll see what happens for next year. Again, Syracuse, just 4 games left here in the regular season. Things are looking bleak. A losing record. We talked about it a little bit earlier, just the second losing record in the last 55 years. It's been that type of year for Syracuse men's hoops. They have dropped it to Pitt tonight, 80-69. And that leads us to one final segment, if you will, here on the Double Overtime, and that is our final words after this next break. You don't want to miss it because Jish and I have some strong remarks to make regarding tonight's loss to Pitt down in Pennsylvania. Stick around. Final words coming up next here on the Double Overtime.
The National Institutes of Health is the largest funder of biomedical research in the world. It spends more than $30 billion a year towards grants researching cancer, cardiovascular diseases, and more. The Trump administration announced significant cuts to that funding. What does this mean for health and science research in the U.S.? That's next time on 1A.
Weekdays from 10 to noon on 88.3 WAER and streaming live on WAER.org.
Thanks for listening. We hope you're enjoying this WAER sports broadcast. Our sports staff goes where the teams go, home and away, and prepare for days before each game broadcast. Our talk show and podcast hosts analyze games, pore over stats, and keep up on sports trends. These and many behind-the-scenes opportunities are made possible by listener donations. So if you're a fan or an alum, donate to keep our sports legacy strong at WAER.org and click Donate.
I'm Asma Khalid. The Trump administration is trying to shut down the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. A senior official who was recently let go is sounding the alarm, saying the agency provides vital protections for all Americans. The fate of the CFPB next time on Here and Now.
Weekdays from noon to 2 on 88.3 WAER.
Diaz-Graham swings over to Leggett, top of the key. Leggett floating down the right side, drives on the right alley, flips it up, and rolls it home, plus the foul. Ish Leggett at 6 points in the first half, gets 2 more here, and sends Pitt to the charity stripe with a chance to cut into this Cuse deficit.
Where do these good teams go to hide away? Syracuse is hiding and has been hiding all season long, and no more has that been more apparent than in this 80-69 loss to Pittsburgh. Only 10 more minutes on the double overtime with Nico Horning. I'm Jish Sokolsky. It's time to put a bow on this, and it really feels like we're just putting a cap on this season. It's so close to being over, Nico. At least 4 more games, and, depending on how they go, maybe the ACC tournament, but who cares? In effect, the season's over. So these final words mean just a little bit more. These are probably going to echo throughout a long offseason, a long reflective offseason for the Syracuse basketball team. So, Nico, what do you want to leave the Syracuse Orange with before a long summer awaits them?
I think Syracuse is on the softer side when it comes to ACC basketball. And again, I said this a little bit earlier in the show. I don't think this can be stemmed down to every single player on the roster, but overall, this team has got to find some toughness. And for me to be saying this with 4 games to go in the regular season is pretty embarrassing. I look at, I don't want to single anyone out, but like a Peter Majstorovic, I don't see much of a role play there. I don't see the toughness that you'd want to see as much. I could go on, but I think more guys have got to take the energy that Eddie Lampkin brings to the table. Even a Chris Bell, he puts his heart out on the floor, even if he's missing shots from beyond the arc. And I don't think enough of these Syracuse players match that toughness, that aggressiveness, that physicality that a couple of these players have been representing. And they got to find it. It's too late to find it this year, in my opinion. Maybe you go to the ACC tournament, you win a game, maybe you don't. Maybe you win a couple games, but at this point, all eyes are shifting towards next year, and this team has got to find some tough players, some aggressive players to try and find their identity. That's right. This team has not found an identity this late in the year, and that's a problem. That's a problem for them to not play 40 minutes of complete basketball, knowing what's going on, and having this outcome again where you let a lead slip away.
Nico, I really just think it's funny that you said you didn't want to single anyone out, and then you just singled out Peter Majstorovic.
It's an example.
It is an example. He's not the only one. There are plenty of players on this team that, you're right, Nico, don't really have that dog in them. They don't really show enough toughness, or at least not enough for us to see it on the floor. I want to just kind of take a step back and look at this season as a whole. And, the saying, don't cry because it's over, smile because it happened. don't smile that it's over. You know, it's a merciful end for a lot of Syracuse fans now that a losing season is all but confirmed. Don't smile that it's over. Cry because it happened. If you're a Syracuse fan, which I imagine if you're listening to this show you are, you've seen plenty of success. You've seen this Block S shine throughout March. You've seen this team in the Final Four. You've seen this team win a national championship, even if you're old enough. That was 20-some-odd years ago, believe it or not. You can, as much as you love to remember those seasons, the good times, and opine for it, wish we could go back. You have to. Equally, remember this season. Remember how bad it can get. This is a low point for Syracuse basketball, not just this season, this game, whatever. It's another blip in a disappointing season. But this season as a whole, this era is a dark one. It's one that Syracuse hasn't seen since before Jim Boeheim in the 1960s, in the 1970s. This is one you can't forget. Remember this. Hold on to it. Let it motivate you. You burn for this team, you better show it. You better remember this team. And if you're here now, then you get to celebrate it when this team does come back. Don't smile that it's over. Cry because it happened. You better demand change. Let your voice be known. Call into the double overtime if you want. Let this season serve as a reminder of how bad it can get, and don't forget it ever. If something like this happens again, you have to demand change. However you can. You go to Twitter. You go to our airwaves. Do not forget this. This is the low point. You're not going to want to forget it. There's not much we can do about it, of course. Just as observers, just, as fans even. Not much you can do about it, but don't forget it, because this is what bad basketball looks like, folks. This is what bad basketball sounds like if you're listening to us, which you should. We got good broadcasts.
And spot on, because you bring up this point where you don't want to forget this season, because you want to feel this anger inside you. And there's a lot of fan bases out there that they'll want to move on as quickly as possible. You got to hold on to it. You got to remember how it feels, because it doesn't feel good, and you got to move on to the next season.
It's gonna feel,
and wait until something good comes back. Unfortunately, we don't know what the future holds right now.
It's gonna feel so much sweeter. It's gonna feel so much sweeter once, and this is maybe a pipe dream. Once Sadiq White and Kai and Anthony come in next year, and they light up ACC teams and restore Syracuse to what it once was. It might be a long road. It might be a short road. But right now, this is the start of a walk back to dominance. And if Syracuse isn't taking steps this offseason, if Syracuse isn't taking steps and doing a lot of looking inward and isn't remembering the season, then this is a team that's not only going to be bad for this 1 year, but it's going to be a team that's going to be bad for forever, and fans will have to remember the 2024-25 campaign as the season when it all went wrong. I don't want that to happen. I don't want Syracuse fans to have to suffer any more than they have this season. But this is something you got to hold close to you. This is the adversity you felt. This is what's going to make it feel so good once you're on top of the mountain again. I'm a big Philadelphia Eagles fan. I know our producer AJ Myers is too. This feels like the 2020 Philadelphia Eagles season when they went 4-11-1. And now here in 2025, Super Bowl champions again. It feels so good because I remember that. Fans, remember how bad this season was because it's almost over.
Yep.
Don't smile that it's almost over. Cry because it happened. But still tune in. We got 4 more games left. Our next basketball broadcast is on Wednesday, February 26th, when Syracuse plays NC State. Somehow a team that's below it in the standings. A really big one because NC State's only a half game out of the ACC tournament. Syracuse dangling on for dear life. Tip-off for that one's at 7. Our McClure Remodeling countdown to tip-off gets going at 6:30 with the double overtime until 11 with Andrew Delapiana and Charlie Fellows, 2 charming fellas. Our next lacrosse broadcast, a team that's a lot better than the Syracuse one, that goes down this Saturday. That is on February 22nd. Face-off at 1 o'clock. Countdown to face-off. McClure Remodeling countdown to face-off at 12:30. The double overtime at 4:30 with, hey, Nico Horning. Wow.
That's me.
Yeah, that's you. And Jared Valentin. If you can't get enough of Syracuse sports, tune in to the Ostrom Avenue podcast on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts or at WAER.org. We got interviews with Tim Leonard and Terry Foy, the Inside Lacrosse writer. A lot of great stuff. Our producer, AJ Myers, is a big contributor to that Ostrom Avenue podcast. Our engineer, Dan Papillo, was hitting all the right buttons today. Of course, we extend another thank you to our reporter down in the zoo, Shrikar Rajendran, and our talented WAER sports desk. Josh Richardson, Josh Solomon, great names, and Jack DiNapoli. Fellas, thank you so much. Syracuse falls to Pittsburgh 80-69. A lot of work to do in the offseason, but for right now, you got to stick out 4 more games. Alongside Nico Horning, I'm Josh Sokolsky saying so long and stay warm.